Good morning everyone. It's time to build a factory. We're going to show you how to construct all three pieces of the factory set. We're going to start with the biggest building, the T building as we call it. I'm going to show you step by step how to construct this one, and then we're going to continue with the two smaller L pieces. But a lot of steps will be quite similar to the ones we'll be showing off here. But we'll show them anyway, but they'll be a bit faster than this one. We'll go into a lot of detail here, so you know how to build this properly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to construct the walkway pieces. Why are we doing this first? Since these pieces are still flat now, there's not a piece on there yet, it's quite easy to build on this now and to make sure that all the pieces are well aligned. So we're going to start with that first. So we're going to take the main portion, and then we're going to start building the walkway. For that, we're going to use these two pieces. So this is the walkway itself, this is the hand railing. And you're going to take a lot of these little guys. These are the railing struts. You need 7 for this piece. You should have plenty of these in your kit, but always make sure to count them before you start building, so you have everything at hand when you start working on it. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to add glue to this piece. Then we're going to make sure to add this along this line. So we're going to add all the struts in. After we're done with that, we're going to put it in the piece to make sure that all the alignment is correct. After that, we're going to add on the hand railing, and after that we can remove the piece. So we're not going to glue onto this piece yet. So we can leave this separate for painting purposes, as it's quite handy to have this painted in like a nice contrasting color to the main body of your factory, of course. So what we're going to start off first is just glue all these in place. So just grab some glue. PVA is quite nice for this. Of course you can use super glue. The downside to that is that you have very little time to work with the piece. So once the glue is on, you have to put it on perfectly. So just make sure to add a little bit of glue on top. Don't do too much, as it will just mean that you have to clean it all off again. So just add all these pieces in. And if you want to add some pressure, make sure to always press on this bit, never on this bit, because then you might snap the strut. Okay, so once we've done with that, we're just going to continue this process. So we're going to add all 7 of these. We're going to work quite quickly here. The reason for that is while the glue is still wet, we can actually move these pieces a little bit. So we can make sure that they're aligned properly. If you take a little bit longer to do this, that's okay. Then it's probably easier to put the piece in, align it, set it off to dry, and then repeat the process. But if you want to build it with a little bit of speed, this is the way to do it. So after gluing all these in place, we're going to use the wall section as like a jig, basically, to make sure that everything's aligned. This is a really important step, as we're working with wood glue. Once it's set, it's set. Like breaking apart wood glue, unlike super glue, is really hard and will actually break most pieces, as it is MDF. So while you're working with this, try and remove any excess glue you can, while keeping up with your gluing speed, of course. And make sure to not put glue all the way up to the end of this piece, as the portion that goes into the wall doesn't need to be glued yet. So make sure that there's not too much glue there, or if there is, just take it off. So once you've done this process, and we're almost done, we're gonna make sure to align this to the wall. So just take some time, make sure to align it properly. You'll notice that some pieces might come off. It's okay, the glue's still wet, you can just reattach these. This is a step that will take some time, but that's okay. It is fiddly now, but it will greatly increase the ease with which you can paint this later on. Okay, we're quite well aligned already. So just make sure to add some pressure at the bottom. And always make sure that if you apply pressure, always apply pressure on the inside like this, and don't put pressure on the slanted side, because it's quite thin and will break if you put any excess pressure there. Okay. If this is to your liking, make sure to press down the walkway a little bit as well, so everything is nice and straight and well aligned. Okay, then just when you remove the piece, make sure to tilt towards you, so you don't move the pieces when they set off to dry. Okay, so once this is glued, just take a look and remove any excess that you might have. Don't overdo this as you'll move the pieces. So just set this off to dry for a while. After this is done, we're gonna go and do the same thing to the smaller portion. So same process, use the wall as a jig to glue. So take your pieces, you should have 3 struts for this, and use the same process. So just apply some quick glue to all the struts, put them in place as good as you can without the wall. Try and get it perpendicular to the edge of the piece. Of course, you have some time to correct this later on. Okay, so same process as before, making sure to add in the bottom of the bracket first, so you can tilt it into place. Just take some time. It's okay if this moves. This is why we use wood glue, not super glue. There we go. Okay, so same as before, make sure to apply some pressure so that the walkway adheres well to the struts, so that when you set it off to dry, it will remain in place in a manner that you like. Okay, so once it's in, tilt it towards you, just lift it out and just set this off to dry for a second. So while this is drying, we're gonna go and construct the pieces for the doors. The door construction is comprised of a bottom guide rail. This you just paint separately and then glue into place at the end, so at the final assembly stage. And we have the top guide rail. For this, it will slot in to the slots in the center and in the sides. The fit in the center is quite narrow, so that's okay. Don't put too much pressure on this now, because you want to be able to remove it later to take it off to paint. What you'll see is that there's 5 struts which will fit into the vertical slots that are already in the wall section. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that these are glued into place, so that we can paint this separately as well. Of course you can paint everything separate, but that will just take a lot longer to do. So just make sure to do this at this stage, so you have less pieces for your painting step. So we can put this in. Make sure that once you remove this, you're gonna have to put some pressure in the center portion, which is okay. This is quite a narrow fit. That's intentional, but it does make this sub-assembly step a little bit more difficult. So make sure to do this carefully when you remove this. So when you're gluing this, what you can see, so when you slide this over, there's a portion that bites into the rail. So just make sure to put a little bit of glue in the cutout all the way at the side. And then just push this in. One of the pieces, I'm just going to get it right really quick. That's this piece. This is the cutout piece that comes with the kit. It's actually the main door opening that's in here. This piece is included, and it's actually really useful because this thickness is exactly the same thickness as the doors will have. So you can put this underneath, and you can use it as a support when you press this down, so you don't break this piece, and you make sure that the bond is super good. So you just put this under while you're gluing this piece into place. So just repeat this step for the other 5. So just put a little bit of glue in, press it down, and then just let it be. What you'll notice is there's several cutouts here. Only use the ones that are singular. The double ones are for the struts. of the walkways. They're going to be added later, of course. So just repeat this step all the way down and keep using this piece as like a support piece to make sure you don't over pressure anything that might result in anything breaking. This kit is very nicely detailed, which is quite cool, and it will look really really nice once it's all painted up. But it does mean you have to be a bit more careful when you're constructing this, as this is not as sturdy as, for example, the Ruin kit that we also have, because it has a lot less detail, and the detail that's in there is a lot thicker, so thicker wood thickness to help prevent anything breaking. Okay, so the last piece to do is the piece in the center. This actually connects on a bigger surface area, so you can put a little bit more glue on here. So a little bit on the horizontal strut as well, as it will glue into this piece later on. Okay, so while this is drying, just put it to the side for a second. We're gonna go back to the walkways and finish those up. So this is the glue on this is quite set already. So what we're gonna do is just make sure to get a little bit of excess MDF and just remove any of the excess glue you find obstructive. It seems that the nature is also woken up here in the beautiful city of Rotterdam, and the nature here consists mostly of seagulls, of course, as we're a port town. It's very nice to be woken up by a crying flock of seagulls every morning. Okay, this looks pretty good. So before we do the handrail assembly, we're just gonna quickly check this again to make sure that nothing moved while drying. This will take a little bit of time, but that's fine. It really helps later on if you know that this is in place perfectly. There we go. Okay, so nothing moved, so we can still assemble this piece after we painted it. Should you have any errors now, this is the time to remove the strut. Just cut it off and sand it down a little bit and then glue it again. Yeah? So I'm gonna take it off again. Put this aside. We're gonna put the handrail on now. A small note to this. As you can see, this is a very narrow piece. This is quite fragile, both ends of it. If you know that you're not going to be super careful with your kit, it might be best to just cut it off now. I just cut it off after the cutout, so at this point and at that point. So the entire construction is a lot more sturdy. Of course, this removes a little bit of detail from the kit, but that's up to you if you want to do that or not. For those of you that already seen the Spilo kit assembly, the handrail assembly on this is completely similar. So just add a dot of glue to every strut all the way down. And then after you've completed that, we're going to put the handrail on in one go. So just put a little bit of glue everywhere first. Just put a nice dot into the cutout. It's okay if there's a little bit extra, we can clean it off quite easily here. Especially now all the struts are glued into place. This is a lot easier than doing this one at a time. Which is of course also an option, but this is a lot faster. So after you've done this, just make sure to line up your handrail and then slowly going from one side to the next, making sure to align all the pieces. You can move it a little bit. It's flexible enough that you can flex it to make sure that it fits well. Okay. So after you've done that, make sure to apply a little bit of pressure to it. Take away all the excess glue from the top. Okay, so as you can see, these end pieces are the ones I was talking about earlier. So if you're afraid of this snapping off while you're storing or playing with your terrain, just cut it off before you glue it, so you don't have that risk. If you want to keep it complete, that's of course fine as well. Just make sure to build it in a way that will be beneficial to you for later on. So we're going to set this off to dry a little bit before we remove the glue from the bottom. We're just going to repeat this process for the smaller one. Of course a lot quicker because it's only 3 struts. So just add a little bit of glue. And add the handrail in, starting from the top, going to the middle, and then going to the bottom. There we go. So we're going to do the same thing, apply light pressure and remove any excess glue that we can while we're doing this, just to make our job a little bit easier down the road. Okay, so with these pieces constructed, we're going to continue on with the doors themselves. The doors are made with two pieces. There's the inside trim piece and there's the outside facing of the door. For this, we're going to align them like this. So you align the top two corners. So those just need to line up properly. You'll have a 3mm gap here in the bottom, which is actually okay because the railing it's going to slide on is also a thickness of 3mm. Yeah, so just apply a little bit of glue to the back of this piece. Don't do too much. If you're really brave, you can put the other piece on and then just squish them together and glue them both at the same time. But if this is your first kit, just don't do that. Okay. Just make sure to align it as properly as you can. Always wiggle the piece a bit. If you're gluing two surfaces, it helps to spread out the glue. And make sure that there's a good bond and also spreads out any high spots in the glue. So just make sure the corners are aligned properly and that you're happy with the fitting on the sides. Try and get these as even as you can, as both doors will of course connect. So it helps if the fitting is done well. It will just look better. So after you've done this, just remove any excess glue that you might have on the inside of the piece. Using a little bit of a cutout. There we go. It's quite nice. Just check it again before you set it off to dry, because once this is dry, you can't move it anymore. This is good, so we're just going to repeat the process real quick. Really quick. On this piece. There we go. A little bit too much. There we go. Just do the same thing, align the corners first as best you can, give it a little wiggle, realign everything so that you're happy with it. Make sure to apply pressure while you're doing this so you can squeeze out any excess glue so the two pieces sit together really nicely without any bumps or offsets. There we go. If you're happy with it, just make sure to remove the last bits of glue, both on the outside, of course, and on the inside of the piece. There we go. The benefit of doing this now is that whilst it's still wet, this is quite easy to remove. And if you have any like excess glue in parts that are going to fit into other parts later on, it will just make it a lot harder to assemble the kit. So just make sure to do this while it's still easy to do this, so you don't have to take a knife to your brand new MDF kit. That's such a shame. Okay, so just leave these two pieces off to dry. By now, this railing should have set. So we're just gonna make sure to remove any excess that we can still see at this point. Making sure to not put too much pressure on it so we don't break the pieces apart. As the glue, while quite dry already, is not completely set yet. There we go, almost done. Then we're gonna slowly take this out. For this, the center portion is quite tight in there. So just make sure once you do this, to just flip the piece and just apply some pressure in the center portion first. So you can press it out without breaking the other pieces. This will take a little bit of force, but that's okay. We know this will happen. just take a knife or something else which is sturdy and just applies a little bit of pressure, and the side pieces come out really easily. Okay, so this is all said and done. Just make sure to check the inside of the piece, that there's no glue there, because there's that will fit into the doors later on. So make sure that it's properly cleaned. What you can do, of course, if you're afraid of putting this much pressure on the kit, what you can just do is put a little bit of sandpaper or a file and just stick that to it. Sand down the edges a little bit. Don't overdo this, because you want to have a good fit after you're done. Okay, this will just make it a little bit easier to put it back after you paint this, because as you all know, paint, while really thin, will add a little bit of thickness to pieces. So it's good to make sure that you don't paint it too much and then you can't put it back together. So just make sure to check this before you continue. All right, so all the relevant sub-assemblies are now completed. So what we're going to do now is just finish the main body of the factory wall. So for this, we need these 3 pieces. So this is the floor section. So we're going to glue these 2 pieces on here. Because it's a T intersection, it's important to add this to this piece first, and then we're going to add it to the floor plate. So what we're going to do, just flip this over. It's going to sit like this. So this should be the orientation you have, as you can see on the bottom, before you start gluing everything together. So what we're going to do first is add glue here. So just a nice line of glue. You can add it to this piece, it's a lot easier. And then we're going to add glue to all the bottom pieces at the same time. And then we're going to press this together and then immediately also press it here. The reason for that is that we're going to make sure that this dries at a very good angle, so it doesn't move while it's drying. To keep this perfectly perpendicular to each other while it's drying is really hard. And then after it sets, if it's not the correct angle, then this construction becomes really difficult. So just try and do it at the same time. It will require a little bit of speed, but that's fine. Just be a little bit brave here. So add a nice bit of glue. So add it in between the pegs, not on the pegs themselves. You can if you want, but most of that glue won't really do anything as for fitting purposes. So we're gonna immediately do the bottom as well while we're working, because we have this piece in hand anyway. There we go. So once we've done this, we're almost done with, effectively done with the sub-assembly. So we're gonna set this off to let all the sub-assemblies dry. All the trim pieces you see in front of me will also get painted separately, and we'll add them later on. The reason why we're doing them separately is so that we can paint them in a nice contrast color without having to do it all by hand later, so we can use spray cans to make it a bit quicker. Okay, so all the pieces have had glue added to it. So just add the 2 pieces together, apply a little bit of pressure to it, and then just take your the piece that fits it, turn it towards you, then put the piece on at an angle so you can align everything, then slowly turn it. As you can see, it will quite naturally fall into the pegs, in the holes for the pegs. Just apply some general pressure down, and then apply some pressure, some lateral pressure to push these 2 pieces together, especially in the top, as there's not a lot holding it together here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just quickly take away all the excess glue that just spilled out, and then after that we're going to show you the second L piece, and we're going to do sub-assembly for that one while this is drying. And then after all 3 sub-assemblies are fully completed, we're going to go outside, paint everything, and go back to you with sub-assemblies. So I'm just going to remove the excess real quick, and we'll be back with the bigger L piece. Welcome back, everyone. We're gonna construct the second piece of the factory kit, which is the big L piece. There's another door in this one. That's why we're gonna show this one in almost the same amount of detail as the previous piece. Of course, some of the other steps are quite similar. You need to pay a little bit of extra attention to the construction of the struts to the corner piece of this walkway. We're going to glue it all together, but because it's a closed corner, we're going to do it in a special way so that we can remove the piece afterwards, so we can still paint it separately. But that requires you to glue it in a very specific way. So that's what we're going to show you now. So in contrast to the previous piece we did, we're gonna make the railing and the door before we glue it all together. Then we're gonna build the walls, and then we're gonna glue in the walkway because we need to align the struts while the piece is already glued. After that's done, we can remove the piece after it's dried a little bit, and after that's finished, what we can do then is we can set it off to dry, paint it completely, and then put it back into place afterwards while it's painted. So we're going to start with the door first, because that's the easiest bit. So it's two pieces yet again. So a trim piece for the inside and an exterior piece. Just apply some glue to the back of this one. For this one, we're going to align the bottom corners. Let me just check what I'm saying. I think that's correct. So for this one, it's important to align the bottom two corners instead of the top two corners. So that's the main difference here. So just apply a little bit of glue. Yet again, as always, don't overdo this because it's two flat surfaces gluing together. So you don't need a lot of glue, you just need to make sure that there's glue everywhere, because the glue will do its work. So just put it into place. Apply a little bit of pressure. Under pressure. Oh shit, copyright. Oh no, cut. So guys, just make sure to align the bottom two corners. As you can see, I kind of overdid the glue this time, but that's okay. We can remove it all. So if you're happy with the fitting, just on the edges, just use your finger to just dry off the glue. That's way faster. And actually gives a cleaner result in the end if you do it like that. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And after that's all said and done, just take your excess piece and remove any glue that's still visible. After we've constructed the door, we're going to continue with the top railing, the top guide of the door. As with the previous piece, the bottom railing you can just leave off for now. We're going to paint that, and in the final assembly we're going to put it all back together. And there's no real need to use that piece at this stage. Make sure to really get all the glue from the top and the bottom of the piece, as those two components, those two surfaces will be touching the railing. So make sure that there's no excess glue on those portions of the kit, because that will make it a lot harder to move the door after you've completed it. There we go. I think my cameraman just went deaf because I almost blew into the mic. Occupational hazard, I guess. Yeah, there we go. So we'll just leave this to dry. We're gonna go and do the railing. So as before, we're gonna use the wall as our guide pieces. There we go. So just add in the struts. And then we're gonna put a little bit of glue on the inside of these pieces again. And then just apply a little bit of pressure to it. So that's a bit much. There we go. The reason why we're doing this now is so you don't have all these really small pieces to paint separately, because that's actually a lot of work. And the construction is actually harder once it's painted, because then wood glue doesn't hold as well. So this is actually something we found out after we first tried to paint everything separately, and it almost fell apart. So please don't make our mistakes. Save yourself a lot of hassle. Don't do that. Okay. Just make sure to lift the railing and keep the strut down to make sure that they're connected. And then just take it off and set it off to dry. We're going to clean that piece off later, but because of the fragile nature of the fitting, we'll let it dry first. Alright, so what we're going to do next is just make sure to put the wall in front of you like this, so you can put it together. We're going to assemble the corner construction, and here it's important to pick one side which you're not going to glue completely. The reason for that is so we can move the struts a little bit after it's glued, so we can take the corner out of the piece and put it back in once it's painted. So what we're going to do is get your two pieces together. So you get your walkway and your handrail. Your handrail you don't really need right away. First we're going to glue the rest. So what you're going to do is pick one side of the two sides. So I'm just going to do this side because it's easy. We're going to glue completely. So we're going to put glue all the way across again. So like we did in the previous one. So don't be afraid to put a decent amount of glue on this, because it's actually important that this stays in place really well. So just give it some pressure to make sure that it's in place okay. And then we're going to repeat that for the other three on this side. So just fully glue this, not all the way to the end of course, because we don't want to have it glued into place when we're test fitting it. That will just make it a lot harder. If there's like really big lumps of glue already, just make sure to take it off while you're working. Just saves it a bit of time later on. So there we go. So important for this is to let it set for a little bit. We're going to of course align it first. After we've aligned this piece, we're going to let these pieces first settle before we're going to glue in the other ones, because there's going to be a little bit of tension on the pieces, so we want to make sure that we don't break anything. As it's a closed corner, that's always a little bit more difficult than with the straight sections we glued before. Okay, so like before, just make sure to align it. This can be a little bit of a messy process, but that's okay. And after you're done that, just make sure to apply some pressure at the bottom again, so on the bottom of the walkway. So when it's closest to the wall, that's the strongest piece, the strongest portion of the bracket, so you can apply some pressure there to make sure it's all adhesing properly. So just take it off. After that, we're going to do the second portion of the railing, so with the different glue technique. So just let this dry first for a couple of minutes, so at least 10 minutes, and then we'll be right back after that. So welcome back everyone. We've let this dry for a little bit, so it's easier to work with, because we're going to touch this piece a bit while we're making sure these struts stay in place. So we want to make sure that these are set so they don't move anymore. So they're done. I've cleaned off the excess glue in the meantime, something you can do as well of course. So what we're going to do now is just show you the special bit about this kit, at least for assembly wise. Unlike the section we did here where we put glue all the way along, we're going to only put glue in the corner. So just a small dot of glue here. Once all this is in place and it's painted, you can actually bend the end of these pieces to put it in place after everything's glued and painted. And that's impossible to do if this is all glued fully. So we're just going to put a small drop of glue in this corner instead of all the way across the strut. There we go. This also means that it's a little bit harder to align the strut. There's less glue, so it's a little less sticky. And you can also add a little bit of glue to the sides here, because you want to make sure that this fit, this connection is really strong, because it will only be connected on this part instead of the full strut. Okay, just make sure to clean off any excess that you can while you're working. So we're going to glue these four into place, then we're going to align them again using the wall section as a guide, as it's really important that this is properly lined up. So there's very little surface area, so you want to make sure that all the surface area that is glued properly. Just make sure that when you do that, you're going to have a little bit of excess on the front side of it. Just remove that. There we go. Boop. So once we're done with this stage, we're going to give it a little bit of a time, so like a minute or something, to have to let the glue set a little bit. So once this is drying, I'm going to quickly explain the rest of the process. So what we're going to do after this is complete, we're going to finish the wall sections the same way we did before. Because we have a corner piece here, we're going to apply a bead of glue down the center of it. So you're going to get both sides at the same time, apply glue to the bottom again. What you can see is there's some trim pieces laying on the table that we're not going to glue yet. Those are going to be painted in the contrast color as well, and then we're going to add those later. What you can see though, and that's something I can explain while we're waiting, there's numbers on this. Make sure that this is the back side, so don't paint the side of it where there's a letter or the letter and the numbers on it. The C1 numbers for the corner pieces are the pieces that actually stick out a little bit. So at the corner you're going to have a bit of an overlap. So if you just give it the same length, you would have a gap in the corner. So one piece is always slightly taller than the other one. So just make sure that you can read the numbers. It just makes it a lot easier in the end when you're finishing up the final assembly. So this is dried a bit in the meantime. So we're going to use the same process. We're going to align them again. So make sure to align the bottom ones first. Oh. There we go. Just making sure to apply some pressure at the top portion here. And that's a little bit different from the other ones, as that's the only place where we actually have glue, so that's the only place that really matters. Just make sure you don't put any pressure on the slanted side of the strut, because that will just snap, because it's not meant to take that pressure. There we go. Okay, so now we're just going to leave this to dry for a little bit. Once it's completely set, we're going to glue in the handrail. But before we can do that, we have to wait a little while, so we'll be right back. Welcome back everyone. So we let this dry for a little bit. We're going to finish up the sub-assemblies now. So we're going to add the hand railing to this piece, and then we're going to finish off gluing the wall section. So I'm just going to put this aside for now. We're going to finish this piece first. So like before, just make sure to add a dot of glue on all the struts. Don't overdo this, because then you just have to take everything off. Oh wait, I waited too long. One downside of wood glue is that if you take too long, your bottle gets clogged. Beep. So for this section, as well as the previous one, it's always easiest to start at one side once you put the handrail on, and then just go all the way around, making sure that the piece is perfectly aligned. Unlike the previous section, where there was quite a tall overhang at the ends of the railing, this one doesn't have that, so this should be pretty sturdy all the way through your wargaming career. This piece should last quite well. Okay, so as always, make sure to add light pressure to it and cleaning off any excess while you're working with it, as it's easy to remove now. Okay, just flip the piece. Just take some excess MDF again, and then just make sure to remove any glue from the bottom of the railings. You don't have to be super careful, just make sure to get the main hot spots of glue, where it's like really big blobs. Just make sure to take that off. Okay, so once this is all in place and you're happy with how it's sitting, just set this off to dry. Make sure to give it the last bit of pressure before you set it off. With wood glue, it really helps if there's if there's a good connection between the two surfaces. So just make sure to do that properly before you set it off. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna finish the wall section now. So you need both walls and the floor plate again. So for this, to make gluing a little bit easier, put the two pieces together. So then you have both sides of the corner side by side. And you just put a bead of glue all the way across the center. So that way when you fold the corner in, there's glue on both sides. That's the easiest way I've found to do this. Then we're going to add a little bit of glue on the bottom. There we go. And as before, we're first going to make the corner. So we're going to connect the corner and then we're going to put them into the footing, as this makes it easier to align everything. There we go. All right. So just make sure this piece is in front of you. We're going to make the corner. So just add the pieces together. You should already see quite a lot of glue on the inside. Just line up one side. There we go. And just tilt it all the way in. For this, especially here, the door opening, make sure to apply some pressure here, because if you press on top, yeah, there's no actual connection here. So just make sure to give this an additional bit of pressure. Make sure all the corner pieces, there's a good amount of connection there. There we go. And then just apply some pressure downwards to make sure that it's connected well to the floor plate. Okay, so we're going to take away the excess glue then. And after that's completed, we're going to go to the final piece of the 3-piece factory kit. This is a small L piece, and this was the big L piece. Then we're going to go to the small piece. And once all those are completed, we're going to go outside and paint everything. And then, of course, we're going to be doing the final assembly. Once you're building something like this, it's always good to think about what kind of colors you want to use. So take into account, okay, what kind of mat do I have? Do I want to go for like a very clean look, so it's like it's a working factory, or do you want to go for something that's a bit more run down, so you want to add some rust, some pigments, stuff like that. It's good to think about that once you're actually building, because it might help choose colors, or if you see a certain bit you want to paint in a different color, just leave it off now, so you don't have to paint it all by hand later, because that just takes way longer, of course. There we go. Make sure the corner pieces are nicely connected. Take away the last bit of glue. There we go. So we're going to set this off to dry properly now, together with all the sub-assemblies, and we'll be back with the small L piece to show you the final piece of sub-assemblies before we go to the final assembly of the entire kit. We'll be right back. Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to finish off the last sub-assembly of today, and that's for the small L piece. This consists of 2 wall sections and the walkway. There's no doors in this piece, so that's a little bit easier. So there will be quite a fast sub-assembly. So as always, we're going to do the walkway first, because then we can use the wall sections while they're still flat as a nice mold. Drying jig, basically. So take the first wall section. What we're going to do here is the same process as we did before. So we're going to glue the first 3 struts, so the longest edge we're going to glue completely. And then the small section we're going to glue in the corners again, like we did last time. So we can bend it in place once it's all painted and still do the full assembly. So we're going to do this first. We're going to add glue to the first 3 struts. We're going to glue those completely as before. So what you want to do while you're doing this is make sure that you give this a decent amount of drying time as you did before, because that just will make the whole process a whole lot easier. So glue these 3 in. Before we set them off to dry, of course, we're going to use the wall section to align everything, to make sure that everything's as we like it. So for this one, as always, tilt it in the corners first. You can already kind of aim for the kind of fixture we want. And after that's done, just make sure to apply some general pressure at the bottom, because that will just tighten everything and make sure that everything's perpendicular to each other, due to the fit of the model. Once you're happy with that, just tilt it out or lift it out straight if you can. You can remove a little bit of the glue on the top. Be careful not to press this down. And then we're going to set this down for a little bit and let this set, and then we're going to complete the final sub-assembly steps. So we'll be right back. For those of you that didn't understand that, welcome back! So everyone, we're going to finish the last sub-assembly steps for the small LPs. We've let this piece dry for a little bit, so it's all set, so we can actually work with this without moving the pieces when we finish the sub-assembly for the last two struts. So first we're going to glue those in, set them off to dry. We're going to finish off the last assembly of the wall, and then we're going to do the hand drill for this one. So, like before, only apply glue to the corner pieces of this kit. We don't want to over glue this, because then we can actually move it a little bit and paint it separately, which is quite nice to be able to do that. That is something that is quite difficult with pieces like this, because of the closed corner shape of it. And this is one of the few ways we found that actually works. So make sure to apply the glue to the corner and a little bit to the side if you want, to get that little bit of extra adhesion. There we go. So we're going to make sure this is set in place. We're going to take the wall section as a mold again to make sure that we can check the alignment. So just put the pieces on the table and check it out. So angle them in, turn them down. Oh, this actually looks really good already. Add a bit of pressure in there to make sure everything's perpendicular. Actually looks really good. I'm just going to take it out and set it off to dry for a bit. So while this sets, we're going to actually glue the walls. So as before, we're going to put a bead of glue all the way down the center line of the two pieces connecting, because that way we have all the glue in the corner. It's a lot faster than having to individually tip every piece. Then we're going to glue the bottom section again. And like all the kits before this one, we're going to assemble. So first put the two pieces together before we add the foot plate into it. So there we go. So we grab our floor section, put it in front of us, put the two pieces together, so connect them and then just tilt them inwards. So that way there's glue in the entire corner. And then as before, use the pegs to guide the piece into place. And once it's in, just give it a bit of pressure downwards to make sure that it's well connected. And then just make sure the corner is aligned properly, which is quite easy on this one, so that shouldn't be too hard to do. Okay, there we go. So just remove all the excess glue now. This is the easy time to do this. And while we're doing this, the other piece has time to set, so we can actually work with it and finish the last sub-assembly step without any more breaks. You've bearing with us so far. Thank you. I know this is a complicated kit, and there's going to be some last maybe complicated steps for some people, but that's okay. This is a highly detailed kit. You want to take your time, do it properly. Treat this like you would treat any model you play with, any model kit you assemble. You can generally only build it once, so make sure to do it properly right away. So just make sure to remove the last pieces. Of course, if you want, you can leave some of this on and actually paint it like a rust color, and it actually looks like it's decaying, like the factory is breaking apart. So that's also a technique you can use. Just be aware that if you do that, just make sure that you do paint it in a different color. Otherwise it looks really weird. So this piece is done, so we're just going to set it off to dry. and we're going to finish the handrail. So like before, just add a bit of glue on the top of the struts, and then we're going to add the handrail to it afterwards. And then the sub-assembly stage of the factory kit is completed, so we're going to go outside, print everything, and you'll see why we do all this sub-assembly stuff when you see how we're going to paint it later on. There we go. So like before, make sure to align one side, and then you can carefully do the other one, so you don't put any excess force on this piece. The handrails are really nice. They're very very nicely designed to scale, but it also means that they're quite small and thin and fragile. So make sure to treat these pieces with a little bit of respect. There we go. So we're just going to flip it over real quick. Just remove any excess from the bottom of the handrail while we still can. And then we can just leave everything out to dry. So give all the pieces at least a good 20 minutes to dry. So even the piece you assembled last, so like this one for example. And then make sure to go in with your spray paint. Give it a couple of coats of cheap black primer if you can find it wherever you are in the world. That will save you a lot of money, as it's kind of wasteful to use really expensive paint on MDF first. Because MDF, because it's a very open structured wood, it sucks up a lot of moisture, so it also sucks up a lot of paint. So use some cheap primer to first get rid of that suction effect and give it a nice undercoat, and then use colors to add on to it later. So sub-assembly for this kit is complete as well. So we're going to be back after painting and show you the final assembly of all three pieces again. See you later. Welcome back everyone. As you can see, we've painted the sub-assembly for the T piece, the T component of the Frontline Factory set. We're going to show you how to do the final assembly on this piece. As you can see, there's a couple of trim pieces. They are numbered, so we're going to show you which letter goes where. And then you have some final detail pieces. These will go on at the end of the final assembly. Of course, we have all the guiding rails and the doors, which are going to be in this position. And then at the end, we're going to attach the walkways. We're going to leave these off until the end of the final assembly, because it gives us a bit more room to work with, and they kind of block certain areas we want to get to. So we're going to do it in that order. So basically, start with your trim pieces, do your door assembly then, and then add walkways and detail pieces afterwards. Okay, so what you're going to do first, you're going to have three pieces. They're going to be labeled B1, 2 and 3. B1 and 2 are on the long side, so B1 is over here. It's going to go like this. B2 is going to be here. And then of course B3 is going to be on this side of the kit. For the sake of ease of assembly, you're actually going to assemble them front to back. So we're going to start with B3. It's going to be on this side of the kit. The reason for that is because, I'm just going to show you real quick without glue. You're going to have this piece, and B1 is the length of this piece minus the 2 millimeters for this trim piece. So that's why we're going to have to do it in this order. Because if we do it like this, both edges line up perfectly. So always make sure to go front to back. So B3 goes first, and then you add B2 and B1, just for the sake of ease. Okay, so we're going to make sure to glue this. Important for this, of course. Because these sections will be used for the walkways later on, it's important to not put too much glue on it. Just try and get the glue on the pieces where there's not any holes on the wall, so you don't have to clean it out. We can clean it out from the other side, of course, but try and avoid any excess gluing at that stage. So we're going to go and assemble this piece. So just take your piece and then just add your glue. So make sure to not overdo it. As you can see in the center, there's going to be a fitting, and you can glue the edges of it, and then you won't have any too much excess glue in the holes. So we're going to swap it over. Gonna make sure that I painted one side a bit more silver than the other, so that's the top side of this trim piece. And then just line it up with the wall and make sure that you cover up the holes of the back. So what you can do is you can slide it down a little bit. Oh, there's the hole. Same on this side, so you make sure that you're in the perfect height. Then just apply a good amount of pressure. And this piece is basically in place. So make sure to remove any glue you have on these edges. Like we said before, wood glue gives a bit of a glossy finish. There we go. So once you've done this, we're going to add the other pieces to it, and then we can go on to the rest of the assembly. When the piece is attached, make sure to clean any excess glue off that you might have. So we're going to also clean off the back side of that. So make sure to get some MDF cut out. And make sure that it's quite square, and then just make sure to clean off any glue that might still be here. If you're assembling fast, it isn't really that much of a deal, because then you can just add the railing to it. But if you're not super fast at this stage, make sure to clean it out so you have a good fit afterwards. That looks pretty damn good. Okay, so after you've cleaned out the back of the assembly, then we're going to continue and put the other two trim pieces on using the same process. So just add your glue first, making sure to, okay, so we'll have a look here. So we have a little bit of an opening on the middle of the trim piece, and we have one a little bit offset of the center, or sorry, the edge of it. So we're going to make sure to not put too much glue in the areas where we know there's an opening, so we don't have to clean it. So just make sure to, we can add some glue to the end of the piece. We need to make sure that the middle is a little bit clean, so keep that open, and then we can glue all the way to the end. Okay, so we're going to add that on. And you can line this up with the top edge of this row, you'd think. So when you look at the alignment, make sure that you take the top sides of the gaps again and then push it up slightly. As you can see, if you look from the side angle, both trim pieces will now actually be at the same height, because all the all the cutouts are for the walkway, which of course are a straight line. So when you're done with that, make sure to remove any glue, and then just continue on putting on the last trim piece. So continue removing the glue as you're working with it, and as it's quite easy to do that now. And while you're working with that, you can make sure that your alignment is as you want it. And while doing this, of course, you also remove the excess glue from the back of it. So from the small divots where you're going to put in the walkway later. Doing this properly really helps build the kit later on. There's some, otherwise you might have some fitting issues. If you feel that this is too much of a rush for you to work with, if you feel rushed trying to clean everything at a good time, you can always leave the trim pieces on to the last. The problem with that is that it can be quite hard to line everything properly, so that's a choice you might want to make yourself, depending on your preference, of course. So as we're cleaning it, it might have shifted a little bit, so always go back. Make sure you cover the openings you had. As you can see, there's a 3mm gap here, because the walkway, this piece, is going to sit on top of the trim piece while aligning with the top edge here. So that's why there's a small gap there that's actually meant to be there. So don't feel like you have to align it here. You don't actually have to do it. Just make sure to cover the holes from the walkway struts at the back. Then we're just going to go to the final piece, B1. And it's going to lay like this. So it's going to connect to the first piece we did, B3. And then cover up all the holes while also aligning to the edge here. Okay, as you can see, there's a lot of holes here for all the additional pieces we're going to add later on. So what you might want to do, instead of applying glue to this piece, you might want to apply glue straight to this surface, as it's easier to work around the holes that way. So just take your bottle, and make sure to work around the holes a little bit. You know you're going to align with the top of them, so make sure to not go any higher than the holes you already have. Just add a nice bit of glue all around the kit. And try to get to the edge of it as well. This will help cover every holes that you might still have. Then looking at your painting again, if you did a zenithal silver, you should have one side a bit a bit lighter than the other one. The other should be dark shadow side. And then align the kit properly. Put it down, give it a little bit of a wiggle to make sure that the glue is spread out, because otherwise you might have some high spots in there, which you don't want, of course. Making sure it connects properly to the first piece we did, so make sure the two pieces align well. You're gonna have a small gap again right above the door, and that's in order to have some contrast, because now you have silver, you have your wall, and then we're gonna have the silver of the doors again. So this is also, that gap is intentional. Don't make sure to not cover that up. Just make sure while you're doing this that you're happy that you covered all the holes, right? So the alignment is as you want it to be, and then make sure these two edges line up so everything's perpendicular. Okay, if you're happy with that, just leave this to dry for a good bit. Why leave this? Because we're going to do a lot of work on the back side of this. We might push this off if this isn't completely dry yet. So make sure to give this a couple of minutes, and then we're going to continue on with the rest of the pieces. So we'll be back in a minute. Okay, so we've given the trim pieces a little time to dry. So now we're going to attach all the railings for the doors. Important there is to first do the top row. The reason for this is once this is in place, we can slide in the doors and then glue the bottom trim piece in place. If you do it in any other order where these two are glued before the doors are in, they'll never get in anymore. So make sure to do this in a order. I prefer doing this first. The reason for that is that this is more of a technical fit, the top railing. So I would always start with this one and then go over to the doors and then to the bottom trim piece. So as always, just make sure to add some glue. We're going to attach it to the holes that are already in the center. Just add some glue to it. Not too much, as you don't want to overdo this stage, as it's quite a tight fit already. And then just flip it over, line it up. There we go. And then just press it in. You'll see that the center portion will always be quite a tight fit. That's okay. Just be aware of that. Don't put too much pressure on it. Just give it gentle pressure and just put it in. After this is done, make sure to give this a little bit of time to harden out, and then we can put in the doors and glue in the bottom railing. So after you put the piece in place, take one of the doors and just, there's two sides. There's a little notch there. So this is actually the door that goes on the right side, because that's the part of the biggest notch. You can see the lines perfectly with the center. Make sure to slide it up and down and see if it grabs any of the pieces here. So any of the angles. If they do, just press it up a little bit. And once the glue is still drying, you can actually move it around. That sounds pretty good. So the alignment should be completely functional like this. There you go. There we go. That's perfect. Okay. So once you've done this, we add the second door on the other side. So we flip over. Make sure the doors close nicely. There's no real gap here. That's good. And then we do the same thing. We check the fitting. As you can hear, there's nothing touching the top. Same here. So once that's done, you press the doors up a bit, and then we can add the trim piece. Put a little bit of glue on there and then just put it in place. It helps to put it down so you can apply a little bit of pressure there. So we're going to add a bead of glue all the way down the length of this piece. Okay, and then using this corner to align it, as that's actually the corner that will connect to the piece proper. So once this is in place, make sure to press down a little bit to give it a good adhesion to the working surface. And then once that's done, you can just set this off to dry. What you'll see is that the railing actually lines up with this edge, so make sure to start at the left side, make sure this angle is lining up with the edge of the piece, and then just glue all the way through. So we've added the door construction, so that part is complete. So we're just going to finish off by adding both walkways and the remaining detail pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to add glue to the pegs of the walkway, of course, and making sure not to put too much in. Of course, we need a decent fit. but you don't want to have to clean off all the glue of the painted surface. Then add a little bit of glue on the leading edge, which is touching the wall. Really don't overdo this. It's just there to give a little bit of extra adhesion, but you don't want that to be the primary gluing surface, as we're going to put pressure there, all the glue will spill out and we have to clean everything. So as always, line up at the bottom first. Would be the most easy thing to do, but there's a trim piece there, so make sure to align it from the top piece now. Just make sure that it hooks in, and then just apply some pressure. You'll see that it actually rests on the top of this trim piece quite well and still aligns perfectly with the top of the wall section. So once this is in place, just make sure to put some pressure to it while keeping some pressure to the trim piece so they don't delaminate when you're doing this. So there's a little bit of glue on the top. It's almost negligible, but we're still going to remove it because it will be a little bit more shiny than the rest of the piece. But just take your cutoff piece while applying pressure and just remove that. There we go. Alright, so just leave this to dry now, and we're going to add the leather to this later on, but first we're going to glue the back piece. So for the other side, I will do the same process, so we'll add glue to all the pegs of this piece, a little bit of glue on the leading edge as well, and then we're going to add the piece to the wall. So make sure to put a nice dot on all the struts. And then after you've done this, put a nice bead of glue on the leading edge, being very careful not to overdo that, as I explained before. Just put a very light stippling of glue there. We can clean a little bit of this off, but you don't want to have to clean it completely. As we discussed, the finish will be slightly shinier than what you want. So what you do, clean off any excess you can while you already have the piece in front of you, especially on the bottom because it's just harder to get to, and now it's quite easy. Okay, so what we do again, for this piece we can actually align it on the bottom, so make sure that the bottom pegs are all aligned, and then just press in the piece completely. As always, making sure to put some pressure on the back of the trim piece, while also putting pressure on the actual walkway to get it into place. Okay, what you might get, and I'll show you that in a second, is that there might be a little bit of glue that comes out of the top of the trim piece on the other side. So for example, what you can see here is that there's a small bit of glue being pressed out, and that's because there's a very close fitting between the top of that gap and the trim piece itself. So if you put a lot of glue in, more will spill out, so you just have to clean more. So this is why we don't put in too much glue. So just make sure to clean that off now, as it's easy to remove, and it will look a lot better, of course, without all the extra glue everywhere. So, and doing the same thing on the other piece again. So where the walkway actually touches the wall, make sure that we remove any excess glue. And there's not much there. Depending on how much glue you put on the leading edge, this process might be a bit more time consuming. So make sure to not do too much. And what you can always do, I've done it, but you can also leave that part off. You can also just glue the struts themselves. If you put in enough glue and give it a good amount of pressure, that will also stay in place. So, and we're almost done with this piece. There's just a few details missing. And we're going to add the ladder with the bottom supports. We're going to add a little bit of a power box, and we're going to add some controls. These pieces you're quite free to put them anywhere on the piece. Just make sure that the areas where the door opens, so you don't put a piece there, because otherwise your doors can't open anymore. Yes, we've made this mistake ourselves, so please don't do it. So just make sure to pick a logical spot. So for example, the power box could be on this side or somewhere here. But first we're going to do the ladder. So for the ladder, there's two pieces. There's the ladder itself, which we can put into the cutout here. It's the same as with the Srylo kits, so it should be quite familiar to you. Or if it's not familiar, you're going to be familiar now. Put it in and then just add the detail piece at the bottom, just to make sure that the ladder looks cool while it's sitting there. For this, it's important not to overglue this. because it's a ladder, it's super open, which means that you have to take out all the glue if there's a lot of glue somewhere. For this, I would personally advise to use super glue instead of PVA. But we'll use PVA anyway because it's handy at the moment. But if you want to do this, because the alignment is super easy, you can just use super glue for these pieces. So we're just gonna make sure to attach everything properly. You'll notice at the top that the fitting of the ladder is super clean, which actually helps align the ladder properly. Just make sure to put small dots on there, really small, like the size of a pin. Just put a couple of dots there, then add the ladder to the piece again, making sure to not touch the wall while you're putting it down. And then once it touches the bottom, then you just press it against the wall. Perfect. There's some excess there, but we can clean it off quite easily. Just make sure that you don't have too much.
Kan je een klein beetje draaien, dan kan ik zien hoe
Okay, whatever.
nog even te laten drukken, gewoon om nog een klein beetje te vertellen.
Yeah. So, once the ladder is down, you apply some pressure. So after you're applying pressure, you can see there's some glue coming out on the sides. But because we were quite sparingly in using the PVA glue, there's not too much and it's quite easy to clean afterwards. But first we're going to add the bottom piece in so we can clean the whole piece in one go. So just add a small bit of glue. Yeah, this is it holds pretty well, even though it's painted. So don't overdo this step, people. It's just gives you a lot more work later on. So just make sure to add this to the bottom. Pressing it down properly. There we go. And then just while this is drying, make sure to clean off the excess glue everywhere where you can see it. If you can't see it, then I guess you don't have to remove it. So there we go. It's not too bad, and it's okay if there's a little there. It's still a connection between a metal surface and a wall. So if it's not completely clean, it actually makes more sense that way. So just make sure that everything's up to your liking, as this is the part where you can actually still do this kind of work without it being a lot of work. And of course you can hide some of this while you detail the piece when you're done. And you can add some dry brushing to this, some weathering powders, and you can cover most of this up if it's any areas of this that actually disturb the feel of the piece for you. There we go. I'm actually really happy with how that's looking already. There we go. So the last pieces to attach are the two detail pieces, the box and the controls. It would make a lot of sense for the controls to be somewhere near the door, as is quite normal. So try and put the controls somewhere close to the doors themselves. You can either add them to this side or perhaps to this side on the small edge. So I haven't done this side yet, so let's try that and see how it looks. And then we can use the fuse box and put it there or somewhere on the inside, for example. So let's just make sure to add the control piece. This is quite a thin piece, so be careful with this. It's fragile. In order to spread out the glue, just take your finger and actually smear it out a little bit. It should still be more than enough to actually have it stick together, so you should be okay. So we're gonna add it here. Trying and keep it upright so it doesn't look all crooked. Let's have a look. We do okay. There we go. So making sure to clean off the excess, of course, and then we're going to move over to the final piece. So let's clean this up first. Don't you just love a good door? I do. There we go. Alright, so I'm quite happy with this, how this is looking. Of course, pieces like this, like the controls, it's really nice to add some additional detail, some extra color to it if you want. It gives a lot more depth to the piece. So if there's something you like, this is one of those areas where you can do that really well. So we're just going to add the final piece, of course, which is the fuse box. So we're just going to glue that next to the ladder. It seems like a logical place to put a fuse box. So if you want to go up and down the ladder, you can actually help see if the power's still on. So we're just going to add that in and try and make it a logical height. And most of the kits are designed for 28 millimeter miniatures. So don't put it too high, because that would look really weird. Because it wouldn't really be to scale of the actual models that will be on here later on. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the final piece of the T-assembly final assembly. So as you can see, we have 2 functioning sliding doors. Of course, you can detail this piece with, as I discussed, some dry brushing and weathering powders later. For now, this piece can be set off to dry, and we can continue on with the main big L piece of the kit, which also has a door and some interesting things with the walkway construction. So that's important for you to follow along closely. So we'll be back with the second piece in a second. Okay, welcome back everyone. We're gonna finish the first L piece of the set. As you remember, we actually had a different gluing process when it came to the walkway, because we want to actually be able to move these pieces a little bit to actually push them back in to make sure that the closed corner that it already is actually fits again. So what we're going to do first, as with the previous kit, we're going to add the trim pieces first. The additional thing here is that you have 2 additional trim pieces. Why are they in the kit? You have an open corner here where you can actually see the toothing of the connection. They're there to actually, like a facade, cover this up so it looks even better. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with these 2 pieces, and then we're going to add the larger trim pieces on top. So what you're going to do, as before, you can see it's 2 pieces. One is slightly broader than the second one, and that's because this one is the one that's going to overlap the corner, like we have with, for example, our ruin kits or several other kits, is that we always have trim pieces in the corner. We're always going to have one side a little bit broader than the other one to make sure that we can overlap and close the angle. So it actually looks a lot better. Okay, so what we're going to do first we're going to glue the smaller one, because that we can just align with the corner. So just make sure to add some glue. Depending on how you painted it, you might have a bit of a zenithal thing going on, so a lighter side and a darker side. Always make sure to have the lighter side to the top then, to make sure it looks natural. So just add a very small bead of glue there. Oh, not to your fingers, people, to the piece. And just add that to the piece, the main body of the factory. Just give it a good amount of pressure. You'll notice is that because the factory kit, the walls are actually 4 millimeters, it's quite a bit sturdier. So you can work with this and actually apply a lot more pressure to it. There we go. Just make sure that you're happy with the alignment, and make sure that it's completely flush with the bottom of the kit, with the floor panel. There we go. Perfection. So once you're happy with that one, take your second component, do the same process, add some glue to it. Small tip while you're waiting for me to put glue on this. All the small trim pieces we use in this kit, it's quite nice to use some double-sided tape and some little bit of wood, and just stick all these tiny pieces on there when you're painting it. So it's a lot easier to paint everything, so it doesn't blow around everywhere. Okay, so we're going to add this piece to it. So making sure that it overlaps. So we actually have a fully enclosed corner now. You can't see anything of the wall anymore. And make sure to give this a good amount of pressure, so it's not going to go anywhere after you're done with this. Make sure the pieces are nicely stuck together. Take a quick look at the edge. You'll probably never get the zenithal both pieces completely the same, of course, but that's okay. Then most of this you will be able to hide with your later weathering steps, so that's not a big deal. Of course, you want to get it as close as possible, and that's also why putting them next to each other while you're actually spray painting it makes this a lot easier, because they're actually in the same line. Okay, so as you can see, we've covered the corner now. And this will actually help you align the second trim pieces, because this actually will sit on top of this, so they will actually connect to each other. Okay, so once this is done, just make sure to remove any glue you might have squeezed out on the edges. As is tradition on this channel, we always have too much glue. That's good. More glue is better, because at least it will remain in one piece for most of your wargaming career, at least I hope so. So once this is done, we're going to add the other two pieces. As always, you're going to have two pieces for a corner. You have C1 and C2. C1 together with A1 of the smaller L kit. The one pieces are always the tallest pieces in the kit. So like for example the corner here, the C1 piece will be the one that's going to overlap. So just make sure that you have the right corner. You'll see that if you put it on this one, above the walkway, it's way too tall. So that means that it's actually supposed to be here. So what we're going to do, like the previous T-piece, we're going to add some glue to it, then align it to the top of the gap here and then to the top of this piece as well. And making sure that it's nicely aligned and looking awesome. So make sure to have your lighter side of your genital coloring to the top. Add some glue to it already, then we do the same thing to the other piece. The smaller piece of the two. Okay, so we're first going to put in the smaller piece, because that's actually aligns with the edge again. So just make sure to put it on top there. Give it some general pressure. Making sure to align it as close as you can to the top of the gaps while you're putting it in place. As you can see, I made a little bit of a mess there, but that's okay. We can quite easily clean that up. It shouldn't be too much of an issue. There we go. That's actually looking pretty good already. Just make sure to remove any excess. Of course, I always have excess. There we go. And there's a little bit of an opportunity for weathering going on here, because it's a little bit dirtier than normal, but hey, fuck it. It's supposed to be like an industrial area, right? So I don't know if you've ever been to an industrial area, but it's never that clean. There we go. Okay, so once you're happy with the fitting, both on the edges and on the top parts here, and it looks perpendicular to you. There we go. Okay, once that's done, we can go over to the second piece. So just make sure to add that on there, making sure it overlaps. So put a little bit of extra glue on the edge, as always. Because we're going to have a little bit of an overlap here. So you want to make sure that piece is properly connected. There we go. So, same as before, add it there. Try and get it as close as possible to your desired position before you press down. That went a lot better. That isn't a hot mess, it actually looks like it's supposed to be there. So, making sure to apply pressure all the way across the piece. And making sure the corners are aligned. It actually looks like this is supposed to be this way. So as you can see, you get a very nice construction where the trim piece that actually covers the corner supports the trim piece that covers all the struts of the walkway. So if you're happy with it, just make sure to remove any excess glue and then do the same on the back. So make sure that you remove any glue that might still be in the holes that we're going to use for the walkways later on. It's quite easy to remove it now. Just make sure to keep the trim piece in place and remove any excess glue that's in there. That will make it harder for you to press the walkway into place. And this is already quite a tricky one due to the construction, so you want to make sure to do this properly. Just give it a good one over, making sure that everything that can be removed is removed. That's actually starting to look pretty good. And it's okay, so there's a little bit in there, but just make sure to get all the big blobs out of it. Okay, so that actually looks pretty good. So checking your alignment one last time, because the glue is still wet, it might slide across your piece a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty damn good if I say so myself. So make sure, because this is a trim piece, to leave it on for at least 10-20 minutes for it to settle, and then we can go on to the rest of the construction. So we'll be right back after some glue waiting time. So everyone, we let the trim pieces dry for a little bit so we can work with it without it moving around all the time. Even though it's supported in the corner, you always have to be careful that you don't move the pieces once they're drying. So always give it a couple of minutes to make sure that it's just easier to work with. Okay, so what we're going to do is going to add this walkway to this piece. Then we're going to add the door assembly into place, and then of course we're going to finish up with the details you've already seen before on the other kit. So what we're going to do, and this is a bit hard to show, but I'll explain it once I'm working with it. What I'm doing here, I'm going to turn the piece around like this so you can watch with me. What we're going to do, because we've already glued everything in place, as you can see, I can't push it into the pegs anymore, the pegs into the holes anymore. So what we're going to do is actually going to bend the row that was only glued in the corners. We're going to bend down a little bit. Once that's done, you can actually fit this piece into place, and then we can continue. So just going to push it like this, and we're going to bend these pieces. So the row that we did here, as you remember, we only glued the top bit of the bracket in place, so the strut, in order to be able to bend this, as you can see, and we can still move this around a little bit, which we need in order to make sure that we can fit this piece back into it, because it's a closed corner. So as always, add some glues to the end pieces of it here. If you want, you can also add the glue to the holes instead. As we're going to move this around a little bit, of course, I'm not too scared about removing a little bit of excess glue, but if you don't want to do that, you can also always glue the holes instead. You put a little bit of glue here. As you can see, it's really thin, because it's just a bit of extra security, but you don't really need it. But if you want to build your stuff to last, this always helps, stuff like this. Okay, so we're going to align this. So what we're going to see is that we need to press these guys down a little bit. And then when they're into place, we can slide this one over, so pop these guys in. So we're going to have to move a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the top. As you can hear, the pieces pop into place. There we go. Okay. As you can see, once they're in place, you can press it that way, which gives you the room to put the bottom ones into place. There we go. This is a little bit of a wiggly job, which is okay. So just remove all the excess glue now. While it's still wet, just rub it off so it doesn't leave a shiny finish. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So as you can see, there's a little bit of glue residue that's being pressed out at the top. Just make sure to remove that. Give it a little bit of a squeeze. This is going to be the final position of this piece, so make sure that you like how it's sitting. Yes, you want to remove any bends from these pieces, so make sure to press it all the way to the back there, so it's fully in the corner. Perfect. Okay, so now we're just going to clean this up, and then we're going to show you how to assemble the door. So what we're going to do now is then add the railing pieces to this. So we're going to add the railing to the top, as we did before, put in the door, and then put in the bracket on the bottom. So make sure to glue a little bit here. As you can see, it actually protrudes to the back of the piece. So it's important here not to put too much glue at the tip, at the facing side of the piece, but put some glue on the sides. Yeah, so make sure to do that. Just add some glue to the sides of the piece, on the sides, and on the top of these ones. And we're just going to flip it over, do the other side. There we go. Side and side. There we go. So make sure to remove any glue that might still be on the top, like this. As we don't want to have any glue protruding through. Okay. So once you have all the glue on, make sure to align it properly. Start in the corner. And just go all the way to the other side. And there's some shape to this bit, making sure that you can't press it all the way through. What actually helps with this part. And then making sure to give it a little bit of a push up, to give some room for the door. Okay, so take your door piece. Make sure it fits. Give it a good slide around to make sure that it doesn't hit any of the struts at the top. As you can hear, it's actually free to move, which is perfect. So once that's in place, we're going to check and do their trim piece. So we're going to add some glue all the way to from the bottom. There we go. Make sure to rub off any excess while we can. There you go. So what we're going to do, just to give you a better view, and we're going to add the piece in the bottom. As you can see, this piece here is actually almost flush with the edge. So we're going to do the same thing here. Just making sure to put it into place. And then we're going to use the door. So slide it all the way to the side as a final guideline to make sure that we don't over slide the bottom bracket to a place where it doesn't do anything anymore. So give it some pressure and slide the door to the other side to give you some room to work with. Okay. As you can hear, it slides really well, so there's nothing pinching anywhere. So that's actually really good. There we go. Okay. So after you're done with that step, just make sure to clean off any of the excess glue that you might still have while it's still drying. So we're just going to work with that, just making sure to remove it while it's still wet. There we go. And removing the excess glue from the sides of the struts while we're at it. There we go. Just making sure to get everything away now while it's still easy to remove it. There we go. Awesome. Okay. So as I said before, we're going to push this railing up a bit. So up towards the top of the bit to make sure that it slides without any interference. So in order to facilitate that, we're going to let it dry upside down. Why are we doing it like this? Because this way the railing we put into a perfect position. If we actually put it the right way up, it will actually droop back down and then your door is going to hit it. But as you can hear now, the door doesn't hit any of the struts at the top, which is what we want. Okay, so once that is in place, just leave this to dry for a couple of minutes. Then we're going to come back and show you the final detail pieces. So we'll be back in a sec. Okay, so we let the piece dry for a couple of minutes, so we can flip it back over. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add the ladder piece. We're going to add right there with the trim piece that we showed you in the first movie, or the first portion of this movie, I should say. Then we're going to add the fuse box and we're going to add the control panel. The control panel for the doors are obviously going to be on the outside of here somewhere. Then the fuse box would actually make sense on the inside of this piece somewhere. So like before, just add some little tiny drops of glue. So not too much, otherwise you're just going to have to remove everything again. So don't overdo this step and make sure to put the glue only at the thicker portions of the piece. So there's not a lot of room for the glue to go anywhere. There we go. So as before, put it through without it touching the wall. So make sure to hold it so it's not touching. Then just set it in place at the bottom. And then softly press it against the wall. There we go. Making sure that it's perpendicular to the floor. That's actually pretty good. It helps to align it with the bottom of the walkway first. Then put the last trim piece on. And if you want to watch, you can look through the door. Isn't that beautiful, people? There's actually functionality to this stuff. So, as you can see, we're going to put in the last trim piece on the bottom like this. And removing any excess while it's still wet. There we go. And do the same on the side of the ladder. On the parts where there's some glue showing. Just make sure to remove it now. Making sure that we don't move the ladder, of course. Then after all the excess glue is removed, which you can do now quite easily, of course. There we go. And you can leave, there's some glue probably in between the steps. But you only want to take off the huge blobs and just leave the rest, that's fine. No one will ever know. And if they do notice, you can just say, well, how are your stairs looking on your Alliance Armoury kit? Huh? Tell me about that. So, after you put that in place, we're going to add the fuse box. So just put a little bit of glue on there. Because this is a large surface and you're going to squish it quite good. I put it quite low on the step again, so it's not too much out of scale with the size of miniatures that you're using. That looks pretty good, like that. And then we're just going to add the last control box to the outside, of course. So and there's not a lot of space here, so we're just going to put it to this side so we actually break up the space a bit. So make sure to add your glue. Really be careful with this piece, it's quite fragile, especially the bottom. And you might snap it off, so make sure that you're treated with a little bit of respect. Then just making sure to align it. Try and get it as perpendicular as you can to the floor plate. And just apply some pressure. And this is also, like I said before, a great piece to add some additional detail. Just paint the buttons that are actually in there. And you can do the same for the lightning bolt that's on the fuse box. Just paint that a nice contrasting color, and then just apply some amazing weathering powders or some dry brushing to it. And that's basically the one you need. So this is the big LPs of the Frontline Factory kit with functioning sliding door. And we'll see you at the last piece of the final assembly for the small, or the L2 piece of the skid, which will be quite easy. If you've survived this far, the last piece should be a breeze. So we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Thanks. Welcome back to the final part of the Frontline Factory kit assembly with our L2 or small LPs. As before, we're going to do the same order. So we're first going to add the corner trim, like we showed you in the previous section of the video, and then we're going to add the top trim to it as well. Afterwards, we're going to glue the walkway in place, and after that's done, we're going to add the final two detail pieces. As you can see, there's not a lot of detail pieces this one, so this should be a breeze for you guys. If you survived up until this point, you're freaking amazing. Well done. So let's finish this off, shall we? So first off, as before, we're going to glue in the trim pieces. So making sure, nope, wrong one, small one first. So take the narrow piece first, add some glue. As you'll notice, you'll get quite confident with your glue bottle after a while. You've used it enough by now, or at least I should. So making sure to add that, making sure to align it with the edge of your piece. Give it a good amount of pressure, so it doesn't go anywhere, which is what we want. We're not gluing this for nothing. Remove the excess while you're working, just to give yourself an easier time finishing this piece off if you want to detail it after this point. Okay, perfect. So this one's in place. Then quickly, we're going to do the same thing to the larger piece, and making sure to put glue all the way to the edge of this one. That's as this one's going to be overlapping a little bit as well. There we go. Making sure it's all the way clean, so it should fit properly. Okay, so make sure to add this piece. It's easier to overlap it a little bit and then just push it to the side so it actually lines up. And you get a little bit of extra glue on the facing where you want to have the connection between the two. As you can see, because there's a bit of glue coming out, which is what we want. Making sure to rub off any excess so it doesn't leave a shiny finish. Or at least more shiny than the metallic paint we're already using. Because that's the kind of shine we want. There we go. And if you're happy with that, just set it off. Okay, so I'm quite happy with continuing at this point. This is very sturdy. So we're going to add the two pieces again as before. Like I said, the A1 or the C1 piece, the one pieces, are the tallest piece in the kit. So again, these are going to be protruding out across the corner. So first we're going to glue the small piece because that's a little bit easier, because we know where that's exactly going to go, in between the two corners. So add some glue, making sure to add it to the top of this one, covering up the holes already as best as you can. And then adding some general pressure to it. Oh, small mistake. Glued it upside down. Oh. At least I noticed before the glue set this time. That's actually a lot better. So, that's the downside of having a zenithal painting style, where you have a lighter and a darker side. It looks really good on the table, but you have to pay a little bit of attention when you're building the kit. So once that's in place and you're happy with it, and it all looks nice and straight and perpendicular, awesome. We're going to add the last trim piece. And after this, as before, checking the right side up now. So as before, after you've glued this, give it a little bit of time before you continue this process. So the trim piece is completely set into place and it won't move when you add all the struts of the walkway to it, because that will just make it a bit more of a hassle to complete everything. So same as before, covering up the holes, give it a little bit of a wiggle, and so it lines up nice and straight, and making sure the corners connect well. And you cover up all the pieces that you want to cover up, while also of course lining up the other side of the model. There we go. So I'm actually pretty happy with how that came on. So as before, we're gonna leave this to dry for a little bit, and then afterwards we're gonna be right back with you with the final pieces to put on there. See you in a couple of minutes. Beep, 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 beep. We're right back from drying time, ladies and gentlemen. So let's finish this. So we're gonna add the walkway to it. As before, we're gonna have to make sure that we glue first the portion of the walkway into place. That was completely glued. And the other part, of course, moved a little bit. So add glue only to the exterior pegs of the walkway kit. Then after you've done that, put it into place again. We're going to bend these pieces in first, and then we're going to push in the final piece. So let's add some glue. So making sure to only put a little bit of glue at the end. There we go. And making sure there's not too much, because there's going to be some on the wall because of the bending process to put it all into place. So making sure to align it as closely as we can. There we go. Bend the smaller section into place first. Slide the other one over. And once that's done, it should pop into place any minute, maybe? No? Yes? Oh, I can't contain the excitement, people. Will it fit? It should fit. Why isn't it fitting? Oh wait, it is! Ta-da! So while you're doing this at home, you're probably going to have the same emotional roller coaster I'm having right now. Will it work? Won't it work? It's okay. It should work in the end, as long as you follow along with the amazing guidelines that I've been giving you. So I'm struggling a little bit with this piece. That's okay. We can make it work. It's a little bit of a hassle. Why isn't it a little bit of a hassle? What the oof! Yay! We got it! Hallelujah! So, people, clean off the excess glue while you're working now. It's still quite wet, so you can remove it easily. And because we slide it around a little bit, especially because I took so long, and we want to make sure that we clean it off before it sets. So, as before, you'll notice that because of the angler, we really clicked it into place basically. It's already super sturdy, so it's not going anywhere. So just leave it like this for a minute. And we're going to add the final detail pieces. So we're going to add the ladder to it. Adding a little bit of glue, yet again, to the corners as much as possible. So it's easy to remove if we want to remove any excess later on. And to the bottom. Beep. So, as before, we're going to slide it through without letting it touch the wall. So all the way down, and then using the general shape to align everything, making sure that it's perpendicular to the floor. So at a good angle. There we go. So clean off any excess while you're working. There we go. Oh, look at that amazing weathering. Who needs weathering powders, man? Just take some glue. So that already is looking quite spiffy. So we're gonna add the trim piece to the bottom. Yeah, so this little bugger. We're gonna add that to cover up the bottom of the steps. Boop. Press it into place. This will also make sure that the ladder won't move around anymore while the glue is actually setting, so that's actually really helpful. So once you're done, make sure to remove any last little pieces of glue that are still visible. And you should have become really good at gluing by now, if you've been following along with all these explanations. You're gonna have a PhD in glue, or at least in PVA glue. Maybe super glue you'll probably get on later on. And of course plastic glue you're already quite familiar with. Yeah, all you mad modelers out there. So last piece to go on is the fuse box again. So small dot. And just find a nice spot. Actually here we've done it next to the stairs all the time, so I'm just gonna add it to the other side now, just to make sure it's not all the same. And it will be a little bit boring. So that's it, people. The last piece of the Frontline Factory set completed and ready for you to game on. So if you want to detail this further, you can add some posters, some weathering powders, dry brushing, just do some general wear and tear if you like, you're into that stuff and into that look. And then afterwards you can just put it on your gaming table and have an amazing time playing on our Alliance Armoury kits. If you've been following along the movie, you should have these 3 amazing pieces sitting on your desktop or gaming table right about now. As you can see, it's a huge portion of line of sight blocking terrain for your gaming table with additional details. We have functioning doors, we have a lot of other cool stuff, we have stairs, we have fuse boxes, we have control buttons. So just make sure to take care of these beautiful pieces and they'll last you a lifetime. So happy gaming, and I hope you enjoyed them. See you at the next one. Thank you.